Welcome to another episode of the Capital Playbook. My name is Charles Williams. I am the managing member and owner of Pioneer Realty Capital. And today we have a very interesting topic that we're going to discuss. And if you're in commercial real estate, particularly if you're a real estate developer, you're going to want to stay tuned for what we're talking about today. Today we have with us WGI, which is a structural engineering, really a multifaceted engineering firm that's going to serve as our subject matter experts today as we talk about engineering, the science of that as it relates to real estate development projects, and also how we might incorporate better methods in the engineering process when looking at a project. So please join me in welcoming Ms. Marcia Alvarado and also Mr. James Oler. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Appreciate it. This is it's a very life-changing experience, being on a video podcast.
Okay, well, good. I never heard life-changing before, but that's good.
Hey, it's a new chapter. I just opened the book on this chapter.
There you go.
I'm
Good
excited
deal.
about it.
Yeah, and thank you so much for the invite. It's an absolute pleasure and honor to be here to have an opportunity to speak on this topic, one that's near and dear to my heart, and maybe have an opportunity to demystify a little bit of the structural engineering aspect to your audience.
Yeah, because I have a lot of questions. I come from engineering science background in electronics engineering, but structural engineering has always been somewhat of a mystery to me. And so hopefully you guys can unlock that mystery, unlock the secrets for me. But first, please allow our audience to get to know a little bit about you guys personally. Marcia, tell us a little bit about yourself, your professional background, how it came to be that you got into structural engineering.
Well, in 1982, I honestly have been on a one-track mind. I was 3 years old, standing on the London Bridge. Parents were stationed overseas, and I wanted to build buildings. So I've been very lucky in my professional journey to always have known what I want to do.
Right.
And to be actively doing it is like a dream come true. Right? To get to build buildings. I mean, I had Legos just like any other kid, but I was very serious about actually building them.
You're serious about your Legos.
Right, we're serious about it. Still have them to this day.
Right.
You know? I have nieces and nephews that are playing with them now.
Wow.
And so, I had a great opportunity to be one of the first people in my family to go to college and played basketball. So basketball helped me get into college, graduated and started my career in New York City. Okay. I did a lot of restoration work, a lot of fixing up a lot of the old schools built in the 20s and 30s. So that was very a different aspect of structural engineering in terms of going into the older buildings and retrofitting them and working a lot with contractors, in the field. And then I migrated back to Florida to be closer to my family and been working a lot in new design for the last 12 years and all different types of markets, federal, aviation, healthcare, multifamily. I definitely had a few organizations I worked for that gave me an opportunity to design different types of buildings in all different markets. So now, as a market leader with WGI, I help really work with different types of clients and figuring out, what's the best product for their type of building, what's the best system. And so being able to bring in work for our team of engineers to build those partnerships and really just be knowledgeable about all the different facets for different types of markets.
Okay.
So that now commercial real estate is right in line there. We're doing a lot of it in the Florida and Texas market specifically, but that's just another piece of the pie for us. So.
Now, I saw on your resume that you did some forensic engineering.
Yeah, the term can get loosely, I think in the past when I went back to Florida, I had some opportunities to work for an engineering company that did a lot of hurricane damage assessments, sinkhole damage assessments in the Florida market. It's a niche, and I was in it for a while, but my passion really fell into the new design.
Yeah. Okay.
So I have the expertise in some capacity, and we have other members of the team that are much more in the weeds when it comes to doing historic buildings or restoration, but I do enjoy building new.
Yeah, it was just interesting because I saw, you're from Florida, and of course, buildings are falling down in Florida. So there might be some.
Nothing she did.
I just wanted to see if there was a connection. No.
I mean,
from the point of you going and investigating why it fell down,
Right. I will say that as a structural engineer, it is our job, number one, to protect the public.
Right.
And so when we are hired to come in and do an inspection or an observation of the building, really, and an assessment, it's up to us to give you the information, and it's up to the owner and whoever's, owns that building to take charge into doing what they need to do to protect the people.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm certain that had something to do with that.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot of projects that were in Florida that came up in the 80s when there was a big boom, and a lot of those got built quickly. Not necessarily that they were built ineffectively or inefficiently, but there's a maintenance component that goes along with these. When you're subjected to salt, air, and water over long periods of time, and you're not performing routine maintenance, you're opening yourself up for some liability.
Okay. So James, tell us a little bit about your professional background.
Yeah. So for me, again, it could go back way into the timeline. I think the moment that really defined my opportunity to sit here today is really in college. So I went to Lubbock, Texas, to Texas Tech University.
Okay.
I was there for 6 years, and I would say not because I was stupid, but I walked away with 3 degrees.
Okay.
I got undergraduate in architecture.
Okay.
And then I got another undergraduate in civil engineering, and then decided I wasn't done beating myself up enough. So I stayed for another year and a half and got a master's in architecture.
Okay.
Really, my first love in the built environment is in architecture. I'm an artist at heart.
Okay.
My art these days has transformed into more of a culinary passion. So I express my artistic avenue through culinary arts. And I was able to realize very early in life that the built environment is where I belonged. Combining the arts and the sciences together to create buildings and these works of art that people get to engage in on a daily basis. And then understanding throughout architectural school that there are moments to express these, buildings and moments to just let them serve as the function that they are. And I just thought that was a very beautiful way to understand buildings from not only a functioning standpoint, but from a financial standpoint, just how we engage with them. I got an opportunity to work for a home builder out in West Texas called Beaton Bow Homes. It was great. I was there for about 6 years doing structural design and architectural design for them. That's where I really learned the value of putting together a good set of drawings, because the people that are out there in the field putting your stuff together, you're creating a template of instructions for them to build this.
Right.
And we will definitely cover this more on the podcast, I'm sure, but that is crucial and pivotal to that communication from our design work to the paper to out in the field. So I got a really good grasp early on of how important those details were, and communication, and to go through the mental process of thinking something through. So I had that opportunity. My wife and I moved back to the Dallas area. So I'm originally from Fort Worth, and I took a job with a small engineering firm. Then I was basically the city of Salina's engineer for about 3 months and said, yeah, this is not for me. And I took a structural engineering job where my first project was a very large casino in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So I had the privilege of being a young engineer working on a 30-story high-rise tower, a Jimmy Buffett Margaritaville expansion onto an existing casino, and I think a 4,000-seat theater, and was exposed to I was quite literally thrown into the fire to learn or have a lot of shame for bad things to come. And, learning through those experiences, I always had this idea in my head that, well, I'm going to do this architectural master's. I'm going to be an engineer for a while. I'm going to go back and be an architect. And being an engineer is going to make me a better architect. Well, what I've uncovered over the last decade or so is that it really wasn't the art or the buildings or the engineering. For me, it's the aspect of leadership. I always wanted to be in a seat where I could help find the best in people and bring out that best beyond anything that they could have imagined. Really about encouragement, servant leadership, and walking alongside my people. And I can't do that if I don't know the material. So I have to learn the material, gain the experience. And WGI has offered me a great opportunity for now, going on 4 years, to be one of our market leaders and lead our Dallas office.
Okay, well, great. So, structural engineering for me, has always been that thing I know you need, but somewhat of a mystery in terms of understanding the practical application of structural engineering. It's one of those what really is it type things for me. So how would you address that if you're talking to a group of 5-year-olds, right? Then you're going to explain to them, what is structural engineering? What really is it? And how does it fit into the whole role of taking dirt and developing something of value?
5-year-olds, huh? Okay. So
I want to make sure I understand it well. So.
Yeah, no. So one of the, I'll start. I got a little story. I think I related to water.
Okay.
So when we teach young people about gravity, we understand that water flows down. So what I try to tell young people is that all we're doing as structural engineers is taking all the load that's being imposed on that building, and we're telling that water or load where to go. And we move it all the way from the roof to the columns, to the floors, down to the columns, down to the foundation. So we're kind of instructing where that water or load is going, and we transfer it all from the top all the way down. That's my 5-year-old version.
Okay.
And then through that analysis,
and it
right,
worked because I can conceptualize that
because everybody can see it, right? They can see water, they see it, when it rains, and where's it flowing to?
Right.
So that's all we're doing. We're just telling the building, hey, I want you to go this way. I want you to go this way. I want you to go down this way now. I want you to go over here now. And then we use different materials, right? So every material that we design with has different properties, and so that's where we have to understand how to transfer the load, but then we also have to understand the materials that we're using and how it relates to architecture and so that's my 5-year-old version of structural engineering.
For me, first and foremost, I think it starts with the question initially. That's the right question to ask and the right way to ask it, and being open-minded enough, and it'll get into more stuff that I'll cover at the end, to say, well, I don't know what I don't know, but I'm willing to open up and learn about it. Would you mind teaching me? And saying, I have another client that's a developer, and I won't say their name, but oftentimes we have the conversation and they'll say, hey, talk to me like a kindergarten, Mike. I'm like, I got it. Don't worry. Because we love teaching. But as far as answering your question directly, structural engineering. Okay. I think, Marcia, you covered it very well. Just we're almost like bean counters in a way. We're looking at all of the loads from an environmental perspective, from a people perspective, a furniture perspective. And all we're doing is saying that load's got to get from up in the building down in the ground without anything going wrong. And we look at a number of different things like, can it all hold up on its own? Okay, that's one thing. There's another aspect of it. Does it move too much? Because that might not cause a life safety concern, but maybe the facade's cracking and now our owner's got to pay money to get that fixed. And all reality, that is the part we spend a lot more time with than is the building going to hurt anybody or not. And kind of going back to the schooling aspect, how we're taught, school probably teaches us really 40, maybe 60% of what it takes to be an actual practicing engineer. That remaining percentage we learn in the field or from our predecessors or our mentors about, well, what is it like in this market? What is it like for this product type? What is it like for these clients? So there's some variability across the spectrum, and we just take our basic fundamentals of how does the load get from here down to here safely? That's what we're taught in school. Combine that with, well, what is steel cost versus concrete, and how much more difficult is maybe this building to build than this one, and how can we combine that with our basic knowledge and design a structure?
Okay, well, that's interesting. Now, structural engineering is in the structural design and implementation process is a small part of a bigger picture that leads to an actual building being constructed. How does the structural, you guys as structural, or how do you guys as structural engineers work with architects, work with civil engineering, these other disciplines, the contractors? What are you doing now to make that process more efficient? And then where do you see the industry going in terms of collaborating to make it easier for a developer to predictably get their development out of the ground and get it finished? I know there's a long question, wasn't it?
I'll take bits and pieces of it.
Okay.
So that we can both chime in here. I think one of the biggest things that we're getting usually approached a lot earlier now, and that's because of the civil engineering, the site, the piece of land that they're trying to build on, what can be built on it. So typically, a developer's looking to build a multifamily development, and they really want to know, is there any red flags, right? Is there any red flags in the soil conditions? Is there a sinkhole? Is there really bad debris where we're not going to be able to build the most cost-effective, 4-story building that we want to build?
And that's the civil engineering doing that.
Civil and geotechnical engineering are spending a lot of time. So we do get invited to some of those conversations. More often than not, architects, once a developer is looking to build something, an architect is usually engaged, and we have architectural partners that have known us, work with us, and so they'll kick that can to us and say, hey, this is what the developer's looking at. He wants to do 12 stories. We're looking at programming and trying to fit all the units he can get in this 12-story building. What type of structural system is good for what we're trying to achieve? We have this height limitation, we have the soil condition, and so we're trying to come up with a system very early on with them to say, hey, this is what we think based on our experience. We obviously take into a factor costs of the market of what's going on. We generally don't do cost estimating, so that's where a GC could help out in terms of looking at pricing a couple of options. But we're having very high touch. We're not, we're taking our back of the napkin engineering and our experience saying, hey, this is probably what you're going to need, to help them decide what system, because that's a very expensive system, the structural engineering part of the building. So that's the piece that I would say that I engage with a lot when we're working with different clients.
Okay.
To talk about the aspect of how do we communicate with developers or architects or GCs, and at what part do we get engaged? Generally, we are getting engaged a lot more earlier these days. But I'll give the quintessential answer that everybody hates. It depends.
Yep.
And it depends on where you're at in your process. So if we start in the very beginning, the fruition of a developer wanting to construct something, you got to think about, where's your financing coming from? If you're using your own money or using capital funding, assuming, let's, for the sake of conversation, say we've done all of our market research, we've developed our pro forma, and we know we've got a piece of land that we either don't own or will own, and we think it's going to be great for a hotel. So we've decided we know kind of what we are aiming. We've got an idea of like costs and just unit rate, cost per square foot. If you don't know that, call a GC. It would be a good person to pick up the phone and just say, what do you think for a hotel, blah, blah, blah. Then you can create your pro forma and see, all right, to get the return on my investment, I'm going to need at least this many keys in this hotel to get the return on my money and whoever's investing. So at that point, we were talking about this in the car on the way over here. Call your civil engineer. That's really going to be your first call, because all of the headaches and unanticipated cash and everything that you're going to run into will be unique to that site. And a civil engineer, not to plug WGI here, but we do this for free, will be able to do what we call a site due diligence plan. And it's just looking at who owns the land, who owns the land around it. Maybe there's a development that's not built yet, but the neighboring landowner already has something into the city, and they're dumping a bunch of water onto that land that you're about to buy that you now have to take care of. So there's other hidden costs that are always surprises, and they always come up right in the beginning of design, and it thwarts all of your efforts you've done. So you could go to a GC, it's fine, but they'll end up probably just giving you a list of here's what to watch out for. It may pertain to your site, it may not. You go to an architect will say, I'm going to go get a civil engineer.
Right.
So we'll get a civil engineer.
So now with your organization, because that's so interrelated, civil engineering and structural engineering, there's probably not only efficiency, you might even say synergy, that's created automatically as you're understanding the site. And then once you understand the site, then you know what can fit on that site in terms of what load that site, because I'm learning here about these loads now. So what load that site can handle.
You're going to get an honorary EI.
Yeah, all right. I love it.
Yeah, so it's exactly right. Because if we can understand if you go in with a general idea, I'm going to do, I want a strip center. I've got a Barnes and Noble I'm going to build, or I'm going to build a mall or a hotel. Get your pro forma set up, know what money you've got in hand or where you're going to get it from, and then talk to the civil. Once you've kind of got those things figured out, then you'll have the majority of the surprises of pretty work taken care of in your mind and in your process.
Now, what point do you bring the geotech in?
I mean, you can bring them in early with that conversation.
With surveying and geotechnical and civil are kind of all synonymous. So we don't serve geotechnical engineering in-house, but we have so many partners that we work with. So that's one of the things we actually don't do.
But I will tell you, so you get that civil early, you're going to get a report. It's Greek. It's not going to buy you much, but the moment you start talking to the architect and the structural
they'll be able
engineer,
to interpret that.
They need that. We need that information as soon as possible. And now, as a caveat, that is a burden we bear here in North Texas. The majority outside the country, you pretty much know what your foundation is going to be. We've got very bad soils here. So this is really good tip for your audience. If you're developing in North Texas, keep in mind the soils here are, as a technical term, hot garbage. There are other universities up in the north that actually use Central Texas as a teaching tool to show how bad soils can get to the engineering students. I mean, we're not far from Farmers Branch, which has volumetric changes. We're talking soil that starts out just a little bit, and when it's exposed to water, grows. That can expand 24 inches.
Oh, my goodness.
And I mean, when soil starts to move, nothing's stopping it.
Right.
That means your building's going with it. That means foundations crack, facades crack. You got to design around it. And that's an exponential amount of cost that if you hadn't considered, didn't have your geotech, and hadn't talked to your structural, now all of a sudden your building's got to decrease, and you're under the pressure of, can I even make this? Can I even make the
deal work?
There's just sometimes as much structure underneath the ground supporting the building than there is above the ground.
Oh wow!
And
so when in that situation, you're having to dig deeper piers.
It depends. We not necessarily. There's a lot of tools in that tool bag that we can use to help. But it may mean a crawl space. It may mean you've got to elevate that slab that usually just sits on the ground. You got to put it on these cardboard boxes called void boxes. And we have to do a completely different design. And now here's a really good point, going back to the idea of integration and communication and when do we get involved. If we're engaged later in that process, which sometimes it happens and there's nothing you can do about it, we end up becoming the boogeyman. And it's, well, hey, here's what your geotech says. Our interpretation is thusly. This is what you want to do if you want to reduce the risk of problems to your building. And it's throw my pro forma out the window. Oh my gosh. This went from $150 a square foot to $225 a square foot. And we, unfortunately, sometimes will get labeled as the bad guys. And then it's,
But you can mitigate some of that, or at least set the proper expectations if you're brought in early enough.
And if we're brought in too late, then we switch our mode of thinking, and it's all about how do we help you understand this at a better level? How open-minded are you? And if there's a breakdown in trust, like if you just don't trust us for one reason or another, that's when we'll start. Somebody else will go, oh, I'll go ask this other engineer, or I'll go ask this other engineer. And there's nothing wrong with that. We don't dissuage that at all. But it can be dangerous because every little piece of information, it goes into those decisions where we say, here's what you need to do. And oftentimes we'll be put in those positions. We get brought in later in the game. We've interpreted the geotech and said, oops, looks like you got to do this. Did you plan on this? No, I didn't. Oh, I need that. Let me go ask Jim Bob over here. And we didn't give Jim Bob everything he needed to know to come up with the same result we did.
Right.
And then it's like, well, Jim Bob's telling me that I can put it on grade. And now it's like, okay, you can put it on grade. But
there's levels of risk.
There's a consequence.
So a lot of what we do is expectation management and risk assessment, where we're trying to advocate for you and teach, hey, here's what your risk could be if you go this direction.
So hearing that really helps you to appreciate how valuable it is to have that relationship with your structural engineer, because a lot of decisions are going to be made based on how well that developer trusts his team.
That's right.
And how well he trusts his structural engineer. As a developer, how do I distinguish between one structural engineering or maybe multifaceted engineering firm from another? How should I set my value expectations as a developer to determine how I build out my design team?
I've got some. You go first.
Let me say, I think diversification of portfolio is important.
Okay.
Understanding the nature of the market in terms of the weather conditions, the site, whether you have an engineer, we have engineers or developers, that come to Florida, but they're not hiring, they're bringing their team from Kansas. And I'm like, well, in Florida, we have a whole different building code than the international building code. And so there's the hurricane situation, right? There's flooding conditions. So there's things that, I think that making sure that you find a consultant if you're looking for someone new, because you've already had that partnership, right? But now you have to find somebody new, somebody who has a diversification in portfolio, understands the different types of structures, right? Like different materials. If you're just building a stick frame building and all you want is stick frame, you can look at someone's portfolio and say, okay, they've done hundreds of these. But if you're trying to get unique and you're trying to do something mixed use, or you're trying to change the game in modular construction, if you're trying to do things moving forward where you want someone that has a good vast understanding of all different types of structures, that's where I would challenge someone to think about, okay, well, have you done some type of have you done tilt up? Should we look at steel? Should we look at, so that we can help evaluate the best system? Okay. Versus if you're going now, if you need one product type and you already know what you need, then you just go to a structural engineer that has done it 100 times and maybe done it in that, and making sure they've done it in that region.
Very interesting. That's a good point.
So I would kind of boil that down into just a more simple version. And WGI may hate me saying this, but there is nothing proprietary about what we do. There's nothing unique or special about what we do. It's almost a commodity. Any licensed structural engineer worth their creed, which is what you're trying to figure out, should be able to generally do almost anything you need. The first question you should always ask is, do you have experience in this? And if they respond positively, like, yeah, we can do this, we can take this on, that just let that trust start to blossom and see where things go. And you can also rely on architects. Architects will usually have a pretty good idea of good engineers to go to and not good engineers to go to. But I'm going to tell you what, all of them, even the big boys, the small boys, they're all going to be run very similar. They've all got a really basic structure, and it may be projected like you're getting, I'm going to a big guy, I'm not going to say any names, and I'm getting all of this support and this whole team. Maybe if you're doing SoFi Stadium, but if you're doing a residence inn, or if you're doing a hotel, or, something that's not, SoFi stadiums aren't getting built every year.
Right.
So if you're doing something that's more commonplace, that's getting built regularly, there is a good number of engineers that can help you out. The difference is going to be in the relationship. And for me, it's the way we like to operate, and that's value-based. Because first and foremost, we got to provide value to you and your project. And that is with our skills, our experience, our knowledge, and our ability to also guide you through that process. And so
I think problem solving and conflict resolution is the difference maker.
Yeah.
I've had architects that will come back to me time and time again, not because the engineering was perfect, whether they know it or not, right? The reality is it's the customer relationship. Am I picking up the phone? You'd be so surprised how many opportunities that come our way just because we're responsive in nature.
Yeah, that's very
important. As structural engineers.
So your relationships, are generally mainly with the architect.
Generally.
But do you have, or do you find that more and more developers are really engaging with you directly often these days?
We wish that was happening more often, because there's this misconception that, again, that we are this incredible, intelligent, smartest people in the room that have this knowledge and power on physics that's beyond anybody else's grasp. It's not true. And so architects have almost kind of set themselves up as, I got this. We're the only medium between us and the owner. When in reality, sometimes architects, they're very good at architecture and they don't necessarily have all of the tools to teach to somebody in a very basic, easy to digest way. Here's what we're doing and why. So those developers that do come and engage us early, they'll come back. They keep coming back. I've got one here in town. We just finished up a 16-story tower with them, and they love picking up the phone and calling us directly. And the only reason we loop the architect in is because I'm contractually obligated to. But they'll call us directly because they'll know we're going to feed it to them straight. We speak to them, not at or over them, and they love it. And they've got two different divisions, a multifamily and a commercial corporate, which is hospitality and office. And they're led by two different people. Both of them we work with intimately, and we text and talk on the weekends. And we are an open door. It's like no stupid questions. Call me with anything you got, even if it's a gut check. We're going to help you out.
Yeah. And I think civil and structural and those things impact the cost of that project so much.
Absolutely.
That it is very difficult to have to go through someone to get to the people that impact the cost of my project the most.
You play the game of telephone.
Yeah.
And now the key is you want that consultant, as a structural engineer, to know when they're beyond their level of competency. And that doesn't mean in engineering, but that means we're kind of getting into architecture terms on this one. We need to go bring the architect in to have a discussion. Or, well, that's more grade, like a grade level question about drainage. Let's make sure we get the civil in. And it's important to know a good engineer it's not going to be a kick the can or pass the buck type thing. It's going to be a no. Let me make sure that the person that's going to put their seal on that answer is in part of this conversation.
Now, I've had experiences where we've worked with design consultants, and these were somewhat unpleasant experiences where they come in and they say, well, we got to change this, and well, we got to do this. Well, the city requires this, when in reality, the city didn't, and we need this change order. We need that change order. What's your approach? You mentioned that some of that pre-development service work with regards to civil and light structural and just really understanding the site. You guys do that for free?
Right. It's actually part of a due diligence process because it's a couple of phone calls to the city. It's accessing some websites that we've got simple access to. Some of them cost money, some of them don't. But like FEMA floodplain analysis, looking at the city requirements, ordinances, not code, but specific to that city. We do those due diligence assessments for free. We'll actually create a little plan that says, here are your trouble areas to look out for. Hey, part of your site's in a FEMA floodplain. Or, hey, did you know that you actually have to provide above required parking for this site because the city requires it? And we kind of run through some of those traps at a high level for you, just to kind of collect things and make it easier for you to make decisions.
Yeah, we have a really robust, with the civil, and we have a lot of land planners and urban planners in Florida that do a lot of this around the country. So, they call them quick looks, and it's a developer comes once, comes twice, comes a few times. I mean, after about 4 or 5 times, if nothing has come to fruition, you're kind of like, all right, maybe we don't do a quick look.
Right, you need to do a deal, right?
But it's part of it, and in our role, it's part of to field those phone calls and say, hey, I got this idea, this project's coming down the line, we're thinking about it. What do you think? And this is our opportunity to build partnerships. I don't look at projects as this is a win of a project. I'm looking for clients.
Right.
I'm looking for partners, and so in that, I'm looking for, do we work well together? Are we having good conversation? Are you listening and learning from me like I'm learning from you? And so, generally we build those partnerships in place. That's where you build that trust. The projects will come eventually. I mean, all the deals that are falling through every other day. I mean, there's plenty of them, site conditions are, hey, we're going to give you this big 30-story tower. Oh, never mind. It's going away. We have really bad soils or whatever the condition is. Right. So we look at it from a program standpoint of people and clients. And that's where I think the WGI enterprise becomes a very valuable resource. Right. We have a lot of different types we have environmental. We do phase 1 surveys. We're doing a lot of these things early on to help the client. And then we're also finishing out, vertical and horizontal. We do a ton of transportation and survey work around the country. So sometimes it's a benefit for a developer to say, hey, you got a team and we have 3 or 4 people that are, we're getting all the information from. And you start building that with the quick looks and ideas. And then you start to be able to showcase your talent, right? In terms of like, hey, we're knowledgeable about this. We've seen this before. Okay, this is what happened, last week at the city, at the commissioner, and here's what they're approving. Here's what they're not approving. You got to be really careful about parking. That's always a big thing in the Tampa Bay community is the parking situation.
And then mobility and traffic impact.
Yep.
So some projects, if it's big enough, the city may come back and make you do more because you've shown to have an impact on the surrounding traffic. We can perform those studies to see, no, actually, look, we don't. Or, they're right, you do.
Right.
So, and you know what? Sometimes.
But the fact it's a quick look at the beginning that for me as a developer, because what a lot of people don't really necessarily grasp is the developer is really the guy who's organizing the financials to bring that project
You're
to
the
life.
money guy.
Yeah, we're the money guy. And so I know you guys understand it, but most people don't understand. And part of being a really good developer is understanding what your costs are as you're putting that deal together.
Correct.
Because if you're just saying, oh, it should cost this or it should cost that, and you don't have that professional design team that's advising you and that's giving you the landmines to look out for, then your cost could be way off.
Exactly. Couldn't have said it better.
A good deal. So my final question for you guys is this, because I'm sure there are a lot of folks who are interested in commercial real estate development. I've learned a lot just in this short time about structural engineers and the profession and how you guys add value. But if you were to give a developer 3 words of advice or maybe 3 things to look out for when they're looking to engage a structural engineering group, what would that be?
You're going first this time.
I'll say them and I'll give a brief explanation.
Okay, sure.
Stay cool. Be open-minded and think critically.
Okay,
so stay cool. Are you familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect? So the Dunning-Kruger effect, imagine in your mind, draw a square and say that square represents all there is to know about building a building. Now draw inside of it what you think your representation of your knowledge is within the context of that square.
My box is really, really small.
Right.
But go ahead.
So some people, the Dunning-Kruger effect, some people draw their box to cover up 80% of that first square. The problem is they don't know what they don't know. And that first square you drew is actually a lot bigger. So stay cool just means you're going to every project run into something that's new to you. It's unfamiliar. And you're going to run into problems and you're going to run into complications. And you're going to run into something where the contractors told you, well, I followed the drawings and now I got this big problem that's going to cost X number of dollars. Let's all get a meeting. When we get that meeting, be cool. Go into it open-minded. Let's solve the problem. Let's figure out what the problem is and let's work together to solve the problem. Because staying level-headed, it has such an impact on all your consultants that are on that call. And if anybody, you're the developer. Technically, everybody answers to you. And if you command that, and like that, my idea of leadership, if you command that call, and if somebody starts to feel like they're even getting out of line and pointing fingers and, hey, that's not constructive to us finding this problem and figuring it out. It is what it is at this point. So let's get a solution going and we'll sort out the details later of where it may have come from, but be cool. And then the other one was be open-minded. So in those same instances, that situation described, when the consultant comes and says, okay, I've got some solutions, here's what we can do, be open-minded to those solutions. And the third component of think critically about those solutions. Ask hard questions. But after they've come up with their solutions, you've asked those hard questions, respect the answer. Respect the answer. And that's going to come rooted in that trust. And if you just don't feel like that's the right solution, be open with them, call them individually and say, hey, I'm still not cool with this. please, again, be cool. Explain it to me. Help me understand this. And if they have trouble with it or they're struggling to really get you in line with their solutions, then say like, okay, I think I need to get another opinion involved in this, and they should respect that. But that's it. Be cool, be open-minded, and think critically.
Oh, very good.
I don't know if I have. I'm gonna have to add a couple more maybe.
Okay.
I think.
Well, these are uniquely your three.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think he kind of said it, and respect was one of them. I think that as a profession, we, a lot of people hold us to a higher standard, and when we get in certain situations, treating people like humans it has to be a part of the conversation.
Right.
It's something that I will defend for my team, and to make sure that we're respected in the way of, hey, we've come here to provide a service for you, and so just making sure that respect level is there, and it always starts right with the individual, right? So everybody coming to the table with that respect. The second thing is, I think communication has been the challenge of every project. There will always be situations where, misinterpretations on a phone call, misinterpretations on, words in an email, even communication verbally, face to face. Oh, I forgot that you told me this, that we have to move this wall. One of the things I have to teach a lot of our young engineers is you have to follow up multiple times. Right. You have to make sure pictures tell 1,000 words. If a contractor's telling me, I'm going to put in the screw here doesn't means what in what relative context. Right. So a lot of,
trust but verify is the thing we say, but go ahead.
One call doesn't do it all.
Right. And so finding unique ways to do it. And then the last thing, and that communication falls into, in my opinion, you have to know your client. You have to know their personality. You have to know that they're not checking their email every minute of every day. So maybe the best form of communication is to call them, and I think that's where, from my perspective, I'm always promoting the idea of the individual, right? It's always, everybody's uniquely different. I mean, in our organization, we focus on our strengths. We do a lot of research on it. We talk about it. We share our strengths with each other. We put people in positions to be very successful. But the reality is our clients and our partners have the same strengths, have different strengths, same or different. And so I think that really paying attention to, as a developer, looking at your team and understanding that everybody's going to be operating at a different place. And that's where, challenging our people to really start thinking about, hey, we're here to solve a problem. We're here to, figure out the solution and really come down to, respect. And I think that, those are very humanistic things. They're not very technical, but communication, respect, and just being able to be human again is something that I have been trying to, find real partners. And then that's where those successful projects happen because of that. Right. Not because all the math was right. Or nobody made a mistake or things like that. That's the successful projects. Right. And those are the ones that are memorable, and those are where those teams get formulated over and over again. Right. And you work out the community, because a lot of it is communication. The referrals come maybe like, hey, if you want to talk to somebody, hey, talk to this structural engineer. This was my experience. When someone is advocating for us, when we're not having to sell for ourselves, that's the best form of advertisement, right? So
because every project is going to have a problem. How did y'all resolve the problem? That is absolutely the case. Every project's going to have a problem every day. Yeah, that's right. And how did you resolve it? How did you react to it? If you want to get in real estate development, you definitely want to be a really, really good problem solver. Have thick skin. Yeah. So, well, man, WGI, boy, I tell you what, this has been a pleasure having you, Marcia, and also James on the. It is Marcia, right? Yes. Okay, good. You looked at me funny. You're like, who's Marcia? I'm like, but anyway, it's been a pleasure having you on the show, Marcia and James. You guys are very knowledgeable, and hopefully we get a chance to work together on some of our projects in the future. But, behind the scenes podcast of what happens next. What happens next? 3 months later, right? Hey, so we're here for it. He's not that far away. We're here to help. And again, it's about value. If we can provide value to you, you call me and I'll let you know. That's the first thing I'm going to do. Well, perfect. And love to have you guys come back and talk about other subjects. Maybe some of with more focused on civil engineering, since you guys do that as well. And I really think that our audience, to understand how all of the disciplines work together. If you're a real estate developer,
you really want to understand how it all works. Geotech, civil engineering, structural engineering, MEP engineering, then architecture, which kind of brings it all together, and then how you take all of those designs and design concepts and then transfer the value of that information to the people who are actually building it, who might necessarily be engineers,
right,
but they're having to interpret what you guys have, put together.
I think that's where technology and innovation at WGI really showcases ourselves. It's the visual, right? You want to see what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
You want to see how it's going to operate. This is where, WGI, we like to pride ourselves as an innovation company that does engineering. So we're always looking at the latest and greatest technology to help us showcase to people that are non-engineers what's the value and what's going to happen when I do this. What happens if we move the road here? Like using a lot of visualization and a lot of, thought-provoking conversations in terms of just not our words, but let's show you. And we can gain a lot of data and information very quickly to be able to do that. And that's one of the unique things I think that WGI offers.
It sets you apart. So you guys are modeling these things out.
Oh, yeah.
So you're able to.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. We have drones taking, survey information from the sky, from the water, from our trucks on the roadway.
3D scans of existing
capturing
buildings.
everything, interpolating it, and then presenting it almost like as like, hey, here's the site and here's everything around it. Let's talk about what you want to do now, right?
Wow,
and so it's about a collection of data, and we let the the computers work for us, so that we have more time to hear what's really important to you.
Right.
Instead of sitting here crunching numbers, we're using technology to help us to be better consultants.
Wow, very good. Well, if you want to get in touch with WGI, if you'd like to, I'm sure you guys are open to having them. The information will be posted here on the screen, but we're certainly happy that you guys made some time to come and sit down at our podcast with our audience, educating us, helping us to understand more about structural engineering.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Well, no problem. And for our audience, if you like what we're doing here at the Capital Playbook, if you like the fact that we have this privilege to interview professionals in the commercial real estate space, do us a favor. Why don't you like this episode, but more importantly, why don't you subscribe to the channel that you're looking at this podcast on, no matter if it's Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. But with that support, we're able to bring guests of high value to you and educate people about what's happening in commercial real estate. But thank you very much for your time, and I'll see you the next episode on the Capital Playbook.